All right, hello and welcome to your second week of distance learning. Just a little heads up, it is only a 3-day week because parent-teacher conferences are designated for Thursday, so you get that whole day off. You're already home. It's not really that big of a success for you, but you don't have to do school-related things. But I will encourage you to lead your parents to the Google Doc that I posted in Schoology so that they can sign up for a time slot. It goes from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., so give them that little heads up. And then we don't have school Friday just because it's a reserved holiday. So just know that in the next 3 days, we'll be reviewing and then taking your adjectives quiz. Like I said at the beginning of the adjectives unit, there are really only 6 goals for adjectives specifically, and then we would be taking that quiz and moving on to adverbs. So that quiz will open Wednesday at 9 a.m. And what's nice about doing school online is that we don't all have to take the test at one time, right? Because you have that option to open it, do it on your own time at your own pace, and then move on with your life. So if you're ready to take it Wednesday right away, that is your only assignment for the day. Obviously, to show me that you're on Schoology and like in class, you would do the check-in question. But in terms of like taking the quiz, you could take it all the way until Friday at between the hours of 1 and 4, I would say, because it closes at 6. So give yourself enough time, but if you want to take a day or two to study, you can certainly do that. We have that freedom with online school. So the quiz window will be open Wednesday to Friday. So here are the goals that we have hit last week. Like I said, you're going to be able to do these things. You're going to be able to recognize adjectives in a certain way and write them in a certain way. So we have hit all of these goals, and now we're going to kind of go over them again in one big presentation just to make sure you can remember all the things that you learned and that you can represent those things when we do our little practice activities. So basics, going all the way back to last Monday. An adjective is the part of speech you use to modify or describe a noun, and we do this to create a clear picture of a person, place, thing, or idea. They answer these big 4 questions: what kind, which one, how many, and how much. And here are all the examples of the adjectives that fit those specific categories. Obviously not all of the adjectives, but examples of the answer to the question that's being asked. What kind? A large box, a purple monster. Which one? That one, this one, those ones. How many? Both, 5, some. How much? Enough, more or less than whatever thing we're talking about. So they get very, very specific with describing nouns. And they can come before or after nouns, right? So you got to watch out for that. That's why I always say when you're doing a quiz, read super carefully because you just never know how that adjective is going to be thrown in there, right? I try to make the questions as realistic as possible, and so I'm not going to make it easy for you to find the adjective, right? I want you to be able to look in a book that's written very, very in an advanced way and to be able to recognize those adjectives. So you might see the adjective come before, like the large tigers at the zoo, or you might see it come after the tiger at the zoo is large. Sticking with the theme of Tiger Kings, I just finished that show on Netflix. You also have more than one adjective modifying a noun, possibly. Several small fuzzy chicks were running around the farm. Her heavy brown suitcase barely fit in our car. So it's another one of those learning moments where we have to remember that you can't just look at the word brown and be like, oh, brown, that's an obvious adjective, that's what I'm underlining or whatever on the quiz. You have to remember that adjectives come in many forms. Her, it's not as obvious, but it is an adjective. Several, again, not as obvious, still an adjective. Moving on to articles, a, an, and the, right? Every sentence has these types of words, and they are being used as adjectives. So when I ask you, hey, underline all the adjectives, circle all the adjectives, you're going to have to include these in there. So just remember that we have a and an as our indefinite articles, right? We defined those when we did this lesson. We said indefinite means broad or undefined. And then we have our definite article, which is the, means more specific or defined. So when we look at the sentence, I will clean the table versus I will clean a table, those actually have 2 different meanings just by changing one article. So we have to know that difference between definite and indefinite and the articles that go with it. So here's the stuff you really need to know when I always talk about adjectives in disguise as other parts of speech, because nouns, proper nouns, pronouns, and verbs all act as adjectives, okay? When you flip through this unit in a textbook, this is what it is. We're not in, third or fourth grade doing, oh, what are the wonderful describing adjectives? Beautiful, fun, brown. Like it's much deeper than that when you're reading sentences in an article or in a book. And so I want to know, can you recognize adjectives that don't necessarily look like adjectives? Because most commonly in everyday reading, these are the adjectives that you're going to see. So the very first type we learned about was nouns as adjectives. I said that many nouns can do this, and they're answering two of our four questions: what kind or which one? So in its most standard form, I raise cows on a dairy farm. Which kind of farm? A dairy farm. I love to read love stories. Which kind of stories? Love stories. Dairy is a noun. Love is an idea, which makes it a noun. Same thing with proper nouns. My favorite cut of beef is a New York strip. New York is a noun. It's a place describing the noun strip. I wish I had some German chocolate. Again, Germany is a place, and this is one of the ones where it actually changes forms. So you have to remember that, describing the noun chocolate. With pronouns as adjectives, there are tons of rules you have to remember. You don't necessarily have to remember each type of pronoun, but I do want to know that you understand how pronouns can be used at the same time as adjectives and when they can't. So let me make this distinction right now. The only type of pronoun that can be used as at the same time as an adjective, they do the same thing at the same time, is possessives. So the students headed to their final class for the day. We look at the pronoun / adjective in this case, there. There is replacing the noun students, right? It's just another way to rename that noun. So there it is as a pronoun. And it's also modifying the noun class. It's their class. Whose class? Their class, right? So it's doing the two things at the same time. Remember that. We move on to a rule about demonstrative adjectives. These are the four that we're looking at: this, that, those, these. When they're used as adjectives, and this is going to be the same case for all the other ones I'm going to talk about, they become an adjective. We know them well as a pronoun, but they become an adjective sometimes, and they don't get to work the same job as a pronoun while they're doing that. They're just an adjective once they become an adjective. So she put that in the oven 5 minutes ago. That is the word that working as a pronoun. It's taking the place of whatever that is, that noun that would have been in there. Versus she put that pizza in the oven 5 minutes ago. Now that is describing pizza as that pizza, not this pizza. And I think we pretty much have that covered. Same thing with interrogative adjectives. It's which, what, or whose. And these are used in the exact same way, right? Whose is that? Whose is replacing a noun in this case. Versus whose paper is that? Now we have the noun in there, and whose is actually modifying that noun. And it's really easy to remember it with just the trick of thinking, okay, is there a noun in this sentence? And if so, we know that it's not a pronoun. The pronoun isn't doing any replacing. We have a noun being modified by an adjective. And last but not least, indefinite adjectives. Again, think about that word indefinite. It means broad or undefined. And so there's a ton of these words, and they're back in the Thursday slide if you want to refer to them. But these are answering the question, how much or how many? And same as the last two types, they become adjectives. So the sentence, I have definitely read the most here is a pronoun replacing the noun whatever. We assume books. Versus, I have definitely read the most books. Now most is clearly describing a noun. And our last section that we talked about, goal 1.6, was verbs as adjectives. Same thing. Oftentimes, when the adjectives are presented as verbs, they're the verbs ending in ing or ed. So in this sentence, the peacock has brilliantly colored feathers versus she colored a picture. We can see the difference here. It's a lot clearer than in the other types, right? Colored in the first example describes the noun feathers, so it's an adjective. And then colored in the second example shows an action that she is doing, so it's a verb, right? With verbs, they're so much different than adjectives. Like verbs are like those action words, and adjectives are describing, so it's a little bit easier to see the difference. And then compound adjectives was just something I kind of threw in. This is when you did the Quizlet. It's just important to know that adjectives come in this form where we're putting two words together. So light blue, brand new, olive green. So just knowing when you see a hyphen, chances are that is your compound adjective. And it comes in the form of words put together as well. So how are we feeling? Hopefully good, right? We've been through this, all these individual slides last week. You got kind of the wrap up this week. And here's what's due today, right? So we're doing our Monday check-in like we have normally done, and then you're going to follow the link in that same Monday folder to the individual Kahoot challenge. I'm sorry that I could not coordinate a Kahoot via Zoom. I was kind of hoping to do that, but when I thought about it, I was like, there's no way I can get everyone to do this practice at the same time with the way the teacher schedules are for Zoom. So maybe someday, once we get the schedule a little more clear and organized, we could potentially coordinate a live game. But for now, you will just be doing an individual challenge. And what that will do is when you go into the folder, it's just embedded into Schoology. So you play the game into Schoology. You type in your name, and it will show me that you're on there. But there are a lot of Mohammeds and I mean, there are a lot of Mohammeds, but there are a lot of other double names too. So I don't want to just rely on that being my sole purpose of like collecting data. So I do want you to actually take a screenshot or picture of your score once you're done, just to show me that you made it through the game. And that is all that is due today. And then tomorrow you will take a legit like practice quiz to show you kind of where you're at for taking the quiz starting Wednesday. So today, check in, play Kahoot, show me in some way that you played the Kahoot. All right, let me know if you have questions.